My brothers and sisters, a phone call went viral across millions of devices. Trump and Ibrahim Traoré, two of the most talked about leaders right now, supposedly speaking directly. The audio spread like wildfire through WhatsApp groups and TikTok feeds. Africans everywhere were sharing it, celebrating it, feeling something they rarely feel when it comes to Western leaders and African sovereignty. But here's what actually shocked everyone. What the algorithm doesn't want you discovering too quickly. What changes everything about how we consume information in this digital age. That call never happened. Not a single word of it was real. Every syllable you heard was artificially generated, manufactured by technology so advanced that millions of people, smart educated people, who care deeply about Africa's future, couldn't tell the difference between synthetic audio and reality. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that makes you question what else you've believed recently, good, because that discomfort is exactly where critical thinking begins. I'm speaking to you today not to embarrass anyone who shared those videos, not to mock the hope that made those fabrications feel so satisfying, but to do something more important, to show you what's actually happening between Washington and Ouagadougou, the real story that's somehow more complex and more revealing than any AI could invent. Because when millions of people want to believe a story badly enough to ignore the warning signs, that desire itself becomes data. It tells us something about what populations are craving, what they're not getting from their current leadership dynamics, what kind of relationship they wish existed but doesn't yet. So let's break down the truth in layers. First layer, the fabrication itself and how we know it's fake. Multiple fact-checking organizations traced these viral audios back to their source. The original Trump video showed him talking about completely different topics with zero mention of Africa or any African leader. Someone took that footage, someone with access to voice cloning technology, and rebuilt the audio to say what they wanted it to say. The lip sync didn't quite match if you watched carefully. The audio quality shifted in suspicious ways between sentences. But most people don't watch carefully when they're watching something that confirms what they wish were true. That's human nature, not stupidity. The same thing happened with supposed videos of Traore responding, accepting calls, making bold statements directly to American power. All of it manufactured, all of it designed to go viral, all of it successful beyond what the creators probably imagined. Now here's where it gets interesting, where the story stops being about fake audio and starts being about real geopolitics. Because while Trump never called Traore directly, the US government has been trying to figure out what to do about Burkina Faso for months. And the actual documented interactions, the ones you can verify through official statements and government announcements, those reveal a relationship so contradictory and confused that it's almost harder to believe than the fabrications. Let me walk you through what actually happened, the timeline that never made it into those viral videos because reality is messy and doesn't fit into satisfying 30-second clips. The Trump administration added Burkina Faso to a travel restriction list not long ago. That's a real policy decision with real consequences. Burkina-Faso citizens suddenly faced new barriers to entering the United States. How did Traore's government respond? With a move that most African leaders historically wouldn't dare. They announced equivalent visa restrictions on American citizens, reciprocity, dignity, a refusal to accept one-way power dynamics. That's documented fact, not AI fantasy. Then something else happened that the viral stories never mentioned. The Trump administration requested something extraordinary from Burkina Faso. They asked Traore's government to accept deportees, not just Burkina Faso nationals being returned home, but other people, migrants from other countries that America wanted to deport but couldn't send back to their origin countries, essentially asking Burkina Faso to become a dumping ground for America's immigration problems. Think about that request for a moment. The audacity of it, the assumption behind it, that an African nation should solve America's political challenges by accepting people who have no connection to that nation, simply because Washington asked. How did Traore respond to that request? He said no. Flat refusal. That happened. That's not speculation or fabrication or wishful thinking. That's documented policy response. Meanwhile, and this is where the contradictions get fascinating, the same administration that imposed travel restrictions and got rejected on the deportation scheme also signed a health cooperation agreement worth significant money. American officials flew to Ouagadougou, not Trump himself but senior State Department representatives, and committed funding for health infrastructure over multiple years. So which is it? Are they punishing Burkina Faso, or partnering with it? Are they isolating Traore or engaging with him? The answer, and this is what the viral fabrications can never capture, is both simultaneously. And that contradiction tells us everything about how America approaches Africa in the modern era. This brings me to a framework I want you to carry beyond this video, a tool for analyzing not just Trump and Traore but any relationship between powerful Western nations and African countries trying to assert independence. I call it the three-gap analysis. Gap number 1, the rhetoric gap. The space between what officials say and what policies actually deliver. American representatives talk constantly about partnership, about respecting African sovereignty, about mutual benefit and long-term cooperation. Those words sound beautiful in press releases and diplomatic statements. But then you look at the actual policies. Travel bans that treat African citizens as security threats. Tariff structures that make it nearly impossible for African manufacturers to compete with raw material exporters. Trade agreements designed in Washington and presented to African governments as take-it-or-leave-it proposals with no real negotiation. The gap between the respectful language and the disrespectful policy is so wide you could drive a convoy of mineral extraction trucks through it. And that convoy metaphor isn't random. Because what America wants from Burkina Faso isn't complicated or hidden. They want gold. They want access to mineral deposits. They want to ensure that as the global economy shifts toward technologies requiring rare earth elements, African resources flow toward American industries rather than Chinese ones. That's the real strategic interest underneath all the diplomatic language. Gap number 2. The engagement gap. The difference between symbolic gestures and substantive partnership. American officials visited Burkina Faso recently. That's true. They held meetings. They posed for photos. They made statements about new chapters in bilateral relations. But who actually showed up? Not the president, not the vice president, not even the Secretary of State. Mid-level officials, people whose names most Americans have never heard, people who can signal interest without committing real political capital. Compare that to how America engages with countries it actually considers important strategic partners. The level of engagement tells you everything about how much the relationship actually matters to Washington. And here's what makes this gap so revealing. Burkina Faso sits on some of Africa's largest gold deposits. It's positioned in a region where 3 countries, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, recently formed an alliance that's explicitly moving away from Western influence and toward relationships with Russia and other non-Western powers. This is strategically significant. This affects American interests directly, and yet the engagement remains at the bureaucratic level. Officials who can be disavowed if things go wrong. Officials who aren't empowered to make the kinds of commitments that would actually shift the relationship dynamics. That tells you America wants access, but doesn't want to pay the political price of treating Burkina Faso as an equal negotiating partner. Gap number 3. The perception divide. How America sees the relationship versus how African populations actually experience it. From Washington's perspective, they're offering assistance, providing health funding, attempting diplomatic outreach despite the complications of military governments and Russian influence. From that vantage point, America is being generous, flexible, pragmatic, but from the ground in Ouagadougou, from the perspective of ordinary Burkinabés watching this unfold, the experience is completely different. They see travel restrictions that treat them as threats. They see tariff policies that kill local businesses. They see requests to accept deportees that have nothing to do with their country. They see American military officials testifying before Congress, calling their president corrupt without providing evidence, making accusations that serve American political purposes regardless of truth. And then they see those same American representatives showing up months later talking about partnership. The perception gap isn't about misunderstanding. It's about fundamentally different experiences of the same relationship. When you're the powerful party, small gestures feel generous. When you're the weaker party, those same gestures feel like crumbs. Now here's what none of the viral fabrications could tell you. What I want you to really understand about why this matters beyond just Trump and Traoré. The fact that millions of people wanted to believe that phone call happened. The fact that the fabrication felt more emotionally true than the actual documented reality. That's not an accident. It's not ignorance. It's a reflection of hunger. Hunger for a different kind of relationship between Africa and the powers that have historically dominated it. Hunger for leadership that speaks with dignity rather than deference. Hunger for moments where African presidents don't smile and nod and say thank you, sir, but instead say here's what we actually need. And if you can't provide it, then we'll find other partners who will. Ibrahim Traoré represents something to Pan-African consciousness right now. Whether he ultimately succeeds or fails as a leader, whether his government delivers on its promises, or becomes another disappointment, right now in this moment he symbolizes the possibility of a different posture. And that's why people wanted the call to be real. Because they wanted to hear an African leader speak to American power without apology, without performing gratitude, without softening the edges to make the truth more comfortable. So let me do something that the fabrications never attempted. Let me construct for you, clearly labeled as analytical modeling, not factual reporting, what a real conversation between these two leaders would actually have to address if it ever happened. Based on the documented policy conflicts, based on the real tensions, based on the strategic interests on both sides. In this scenario, built on patterns we can verify, Trump would likely open with economic opportunity language. America wants to invest, wants to partner, wants to help Burkina Faso develop. That's standard opening framework for these conversations. But then he'd have to get specific. What he'd really be asking for is preferential access to minerals, commitments on resource exports, cooperation on security issues related to Russian presence in the region. And here's where it would get interesting. Because Traore, based on every documented action his government has taken, wouldn't respond with grateful acceptance. He'd ask about the travel restrictions. He'd ask about the tariffs that punish Burkinabe businesses. He'd ask why partnership looks like restrictions and demands rather than respect and negotiation. He'd ask the question that American officials rarely have to answer directly. What are you actually offering that we can't get elsewhere? Because here's the reality that changes leverage. China offers African nations duty-free access to its markets. Russia offers security cooperation without lectures about democracy and governance. Turkey offers infrastructure investment without the conditional terms that Western institutions attach. America offers health funding with one hand while imposing travel bans and tariffs with the other. If you're an African leader doing the math, which partnership actually serves your population better? That's the question a real conversation would have to grapple with. And it's the question that makes American officials deeply uncomfortable, because the answer isn't obvious anymore. The era when America could assume African countries had no alternatives, that era is over. The world has changed. Africa has options now. Not perfect options, not partners without their own agendas, but options nonetheless. And that changes everything about negotiation dynamics. What would Traore say that would genuinely shock people? Probably something most African leaders think but never say out loud to American presidents. That aid is not generosity when it represents a fraction of the wealth extracted. That partnership is not partnership when one side writes all the rules. That sovereignty means nothing if it can't include the right to say no, the right to choose different partners, the right to prioritize your own population's needs over foreign strategic interests. Those truths aren't shocking because they're false. They're shocking because they're rarely stated plainly in diplomatic settings. But whether or not any such conversation ever happens, the structural realities remain. America needs African resources for its technological and economic future. Africa needs development, infrastructure, fair terms of trade. There's potential for real partnership in that mutual need. But it requires something America has historically been unwilling to offer Africa: equal negotiation, real reciprocity, respect that goes beyond rhetoric. And that's what makes the viral fabrications so fascinating as cultural artifacts. They didn't spread because people are gullible. They spread because people are hungry. Hungry for a vision of African leadership that doesn't bow. Hungry for relationships built on dignity rather than dependency. Hungry for the possibility that this generation might finally see something different than what their parents and grandparents experienced. So what do you do with this information? 3 things. First, verify everything independently, especially when it confirms what you want to believe. The stories that feel most satisfying are often the ones that need the most scrutiny. Second, apply the 3-gap analysis to every relationship between African nations and external powers you see reported. Ask about the rhetoric gap, the engagement gap, the perception divide. Those questions will tell you more than any official statement. Third, recognize your own power in this dynamic. You don't need a phone call between presidents to demand accountability. You don't need permission from foreign leaders to organize for transparency. You don't need validation from anyone to understand that African populations deserve trade terms, partnership structures, and diplomatic relationships built on actual equality, not performative respect. The sovereignty that matters isn't what presidents negotiate behind closed doors. It's what millions of ordinary people demand so consistently and so loudly that ignoring those demands becomes politically impossible. This channel exists to build that kind of consciousness, to provide analysis that respects your intelligence, that separates fact from fabrication, that acknowledges uncertainty rather than pretending to know everything. Subscribe if you value truth over comforting lies, frameworks over empty outrage, strategic literacy over viral manipulation. Share this with someone who needs these analytical tools, and recognize that the revolution we need isn't dramatic confrontations that make great audio clips. It's the patient work of millions learning to see clearly, question constantly, and demand relentlessly until the relationship between Africa and the world finally reflects what populations actually deserve, rather than what powers are willing to concede. That work continues, the struggle continues, and together, armed with truth and frameworks, and the refusal to be manipulated by either fabrications or official propaganda, we become impossible to deceive. Thank you for your intellectual engagement. Until the next analysis.